Hey guys, what's up? On Wrist It Back, I'm here with Deco-chan. Oh, look at him say hi. Hello, hello. I'm sitting in Daddy's lap. I'm very comfy. I know, I'm sorry, buddy. Doof. Guys, what's up? Today I want to answer a question that I get a lot, and one that was brought up in my last video, and I'm too lazy to go back and look at the comments because I just worked a 15-hour shift at my school. It was about weeaboos in Japan. When someone is a weeaboo, first of all, what is a weeaboo? Let's define this before we get started, because maybe there's actually people in the audience who've never heard the word weeaboo before. If you are a weeaboo, you are usually somebody who is overly interested in anime and manga, or obsessed with a certain anime or manga, and it's like to a point that you have like multiple action figures, pillows, decorations in your room. It usually reaches kind of like an obsessive level. Some people confuse otaku with weeaboo. Really, the word otaku just means mania. So you can be an otaku for anything. So, like in Japan, there's densha otaku, which are people obsessed with trains. They don't just say otaku only means anime or manga. So, anyway, we're talking about the weeaboo version, and the weeaboo is always obsessed with manga and anime. There isn't something else they're obsessed with. Usually, there's like an overall obsession with Japanese culture, which I think that aspect is fine. But we're talking about why the weeaboo might have trouble fitting in Japan in general. Um, Honestly, and this might sound harsh, and I have nothing against being a weeaboo. You want to be a weeaboo, be you, okay? Do it, go for it. But I will say, when I first got to Japan back in 2007, I came over with Nova, a big Ikaiwa English conversation company that went bankrupt only 3 months later. The people who did not survive or did not last long at all, and I'm talking like they only lasted like maybe 3 weeks at most and then headed back to their home country, were mostly the weeaboos. So today is mostly about why a lot of weeaboos don't last long in Japan. And if you yourself are a weeaboo, you might just want to think about this. If you are someone who is overly obsessed with a certain anime or manga, just take this into consideration, okay? Let's cut into some of these reasons and see why it doesn't always work out. And if I cough today during the video, I'm still getting over a cold. As a teacher, you touch a lot of germs, so I'm always getting a cold. There we go. Get that cough out of the way. Number one, I wrote down a nice little list. Okay. Number one, your anime or manga love is not an exciting connection. I think a lot of people in the weeaboo culture who are overly obsessive with like maybe something like Shingeki no Kyojin or Kimetsu no Yaiba, which is Attack on Titan, or Demon Slayer as their English relative names are. If they are obsessed with these, they might find coming over to Japan and talking excitedly about them would not be an overly exciting connection to Japanese people. In Japan, these things are everywhere. Everybody knows about them. They're even part of products and things that are sold. Like, you could probably find a shampoo with Attack on Titan on it, or a candy bar with Kimetsu no Yaiba Demon Slayer stuff on it. I'm sure you could probably find that. That's like, check out the new Demon Slayer version of Kit Kat, okay? There's always like things that are tied into advertising and connecting, so the Japanese see this stuff all the time. It would be the equivalent to being like, coming to America and someone saying to you, hey, do you know SpongeBob? Have you ever heard of SpongeBob? I'm really excited about SpongeBob. You'd be like, yeah, I mean, everybody's seen some kind of SpongeBob something. And SpongeBob is on like a bunch of products. There's probably like a bunch of kid products out for SpongeBob. There's probably like towels with SpongeBob on it. There's clothing, there's t-shirts, there's everything SpongeBob. No one, you wouldn't be like, oh my god, you like SpongeBob too? Oh my god, we could be like SpongeBob buds. It's not going to overly excite an American to hear you're into SpongeBob. And the same thing, vice versa, would be true for the Japanese. If you came over there and like, have you ever heard of Demon Slayer? They'd be like, yeah, go to 7-Eleven and there's like 5 different, ice pops with Demon Slayer on it, and Fanta Soda also has a Demon Slayer advertisement across it as well. So yeah, of course I've heard about it. I mean, that's cool that you're into it. But to be honest, like most Japanese people would more be into learning more about your culture. Like if they can speak English and they're interested in talking to someone from another country like America or any other Western country, they'd probably be more excited in talking to you about things that, they might be stuff you already know about in your country. Like, I don't know. Maybe they'll talk about Justin Bieber. They'll be like, do you know who Justin Bieber is? And you'd be like, oh yeah, I guess I do. Okay, what do you want to talk about Justin Bieber? Like they wouldn't talk about things that are culturally connected to your country instead of talking about things that have been around forever in their own country. So if they're interested in that, you might find that their connection to learning about Western countries is more about being able to talk to Westerners about what is part of Western culture, which, I mean, doesn't that make sense? If they've learned to speak English, they're probably interested in a lot of stuff overseas, and they don't want to talk to someone overseas about something they have to see every single day in their own country. I hope I made sense with that one. Your anime or manga love is not an exciting connection. That was the point to it. Also, you might find, and this is something I was always like, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. That wouldn't be very relevant to anybody here. You might find that the stuff you're into is so old that people are wondering why you would want to make a connection with that stuff. I didn't find this so much because I didn't come over with like a lot of anime or manga knowledge, but I noticed when people would ask me what my favorite Japanese manga, or what was the first Japanese manga or anime that I watched, that I learned about, Japanese cartoons, I guess as some people call them. My first introduction was back when I was in 8th grade. I watched Akira, which if you haven't watched Akira, you should. It's amazing. Even to this day, I'd say it's a really amazing movie. It was super popular back when I was still a young tween. And if I said that movie to them, they'd be like, Akira? Oh, yeah, I guess I know that really old movie. Because even when it had come out in America, it was already really old in Japan. It was probably like 8 years old in Japan before it had been finally translated, sent over, put on the right type of VCR tape. Yes, back then we used to watch things on a VCR. And they'd be like, why is your first connection with Japanese culture like so ancient? And I saw other friends who came over and they were excited to talk about things like Naruto or Dragon Ball Z. And Japanese people would be not really that excited unless they were like super otaku into that stuff. But they'd just be like, oh yeah, Naruto. Yeah, I guess I watched some of those a long time ago when I was like in kindergarten. They just couldn't make a connection because it was so old to them. It was like coming over to America and be like, yeah, my first connection to cartoons was Snoopy. And you'd be like, Snoopy? Oh, you mean like Peanuts? I guess like a long time ago I used to watch like the Peanuts Christmas special. Yeah, I guess I know about that. Like, but why such an old cartoon strip? Why such an old newspaper cartoon strip? What? Why that? Like, it's really confusing to them why you'd be connected on something so old. So you might find out what you like in America because it took so long to get there. And this is happening less and less now that you have things like Crunchyroll and things like that translate things immediately. But that still didn't exist in 2007 when I first got there. But you might still find like what you like or what you got started on was like mega old in Japan already. Nobody was into it anymore. Like there is still some people who like Dragon Ball Z, and there is new versions of Dragon Ball Z, and yes, I know there's new versions of Baruto, which is Naruto's son, that come out, but that's considered like following like a super, super old series. Okay, so Japanese people are not quick to share their likes and hobbies. So even if you are able to connect to somebody else who's really into anime or manga, maybe they have like a really unique one that you've never even heard of before. And I found this happened all the time. Like when you would find Japanese people who actually watched anime or read a bunch of manga, they would be into anime and manga I had never heard of. My wife even, she'd always be reading series and be like, where did you hear of this? She read Saint Onisan, which I was like, what what is this manga? And it was about like Buddha and Jesus hanging out as college roommates. And it was a really funny and like hilarious manga. And she was really into it, but I'd never even heard anything about this because it had never been translated or brought over to America. You couldn't even find scantilations of it. So you're gonna find like this is pretty common that people in Japan, if they are reading manga, if they are into anime or manga, you may have never even heard of it. It may never even come close to getting translated in America because either number one, someone decided there's no appeal for it, which sucks because honestly there probably is. There is like a lot of good stuff I think doesn't get translated still to this day. Or you're just gonna find that the Japanese people in general are so much more private and hide their hobbies so much more than Americans do, where you can start a kind of casual conversation even with someone. Like if you went to like a Comic-Con and you started to talk to someone about their favorite comics, or even if they had like a manga that they loved, you could talk to someone at a Comic-Con and right away they'd strike up a conversation with you in America. Not so much in Japan. Sharing a lot of your private life, even private likes and dislikes, not something people do right off the street. Even if you walked into a manga shop and tried to start talking to other people buying manga, number one, you'd probably have to speak Japanese to be able to do it. The average manga shopper reading Japanese manga probably isn't fluent in English. I mean, you should always expect that you have to speak the country's native language wherever you are in that country. But first of all, you'd probably have to speak Japanese. And number two, they'd probably be a little bit more shy about like, oh, yeah, you like that manga too? Okay, cool. Anyway, I'm going to go make my purchase and head home and read my manga. Bye. Never talk to me again. It's not like that. It's not like they want to like push you out of their life. But Japanese in general are just far more private. Don't expect them to suddenly get excited or suddenly have to be tried to force to speak English about something that would be very difficult to try and speak English about. I mean, think about some of the concepts in some of these more complex manga. And it would be, I mean, even things like, you know, Demon Slayer. There's so much old school Japanese in there, or Shingeki no Kyojin, Attack on Titan, trying to have a conversation about that. I mean, there's like translations from German to Japanese, and then you'd have to switch it back again. It would be such a complicated conversation to try and have in either language. I can't imagine. Let's see. The other thing is most Japanese, and I'm reading this from my notes directly, most Japanese don't even have time to make a deep connection or can make time to make a deep connection with a gaijin, especially if it involves learning another language. So that's the thing, like if you're going to try and connect with people on a certain anime or manga that you love, don't expect that that person would be very deep into the richest Japanese lore around anything manga based, and that they also have a love for the English language. Like it's such a far removal. Like a lot of Japanese manga gets deep into more and more complicated kanji, obviously because the ideas get more complicated and they're using bigger words, and bigger words is more rare kanji. So they've gotten into like the Japanese language really deep, where they have a huge vocabulary. They probably have a bunch of concepts that they're reading about in the manga that they're into, like it's science-based manga, or you know, like in Japan there's really a manga about anything. I mean, there's manga about tennis and golf and things like this, and they've gotten deep into these and learned all the lexicon and vocabulary around these. They're loving, they're learning, they're enjoying these. They're probably not making time to learn English at the same time. To do so, they have to schedule English lessons. They have to talk to an actual gaijin, an actual foreigner, so they learn how actual natural conversation works. They would have to have traveled outside of Japan, which a lot of Japanese people have never traveled outside of Japan. I don't think a lot of people realize that. They think, surely they must be obsessed with my country, America, because best country ever. No, they're really quite comfortable in Japan. They haven't had any reason or need or want to travel nor learn your country's language. That's not always common at all. In fact, it's quite rare. And usually what I would say, and maybe I'm kind of pigeonholing some Japanese by saying this, but I would say most of the Japanese who do speak English well enough to have like a deep conversation and want to make a gaijin friend are kind of English otaku. Like they are obsessed with learning English or learning how to be able to speak to people outside of their own country. And when they are obsessed with that, their obsession usually doesn't lie in the more rare finds of Japanese culture as far as manga and anime is concerned. So let's say you're really deep into the lore of manga and anime and you're reading some super obscure manga or anime. Probably that Japanese person who can speak perfect English and have a conversation with you has never heard about it, because they've taken all their free time and their skill points to master English and learn all about your country. They want to talk about, Taylor Swift. They want to talk about things that are popular, maybe American football in your country, because they've taken all this time to learn about that. None of that stuff exists around, nor are there a large culture around those kind of American subjects within the groups that they're part of in Japan. So now that they finally get to meet you, a foreigner from that country that they studied so much about, they're way more excited to talk to you about those things rather than be like, oh yeah, I guess we do have this like super rare manga or Japanese anime in my country that I've never had time to get into because I've been so busy learning about you. Now let's talk about you and your country. So I mean, I will say, if you want to go there as a weeaboo, someone who is super obsessed with anime and manga, I would come with some Japanese speaking ability. Maybe then you can go to places like Denden Town in Osaka or Akihabara in Tokyo and meet those Japanese otaku who are deep into the anime and manga lore and start up conversations with them at a maid cafe or some place where they congregate. That would seem more likely rather than you coming only able to speak English and then finding out nobody is excited about your loves and interests of the most well-known anime and manga in Japan. And I think that's one of the things that really shocked a lot of the more weeaboo culture that came over. And look, I keep saying America because I'm from America, but I saw this happen from every English-speaking country. There was New Zealanders that headed right back to New Zealand. There was Australians. There was people from the UK. There were people from any English-speaking country that once they came there and found out Japanese weren't super excited about their weeaboo finds and loves, they were shocked and headed right back. Japan was not what they expected. For some, it was like different reasons. Like I was kind of almost irrational, where I was like, okay, yeah, of course Japan isn't like that, where they thought there was still like Edo type culture within Japan with like samurai and ninjas and stuff, and it's just like, did you research anything before you came? You're always going to find people like that who like didn't research anything and expected Japan was still like Edo era Japan, which you're just like, wow, really? Oh my god, what? And look, the vice versa situation exists, where I've met Japanese who ask me if everybody in America walks down the street with a gun because they've read some kind of super crazy news article from some sort of right-wing Japanese nationalist column where they say like, don't go to America, it's super dangerous, everybody's got guns and they're shooting each other all the time. Yeah, like there's weird obsessions with parts of culture that take it completely out of hand, and then the person goes there and is completely confused and like a fish out of water because they got some wrong information. I think the other thing that kind of turned a lot of weeaboos off was just that it's not so easy to strike up a conversation in Japan. It's just not the same way you can strike up a conversation in America. If you were sitting next to someone on a bus, or you were sitting next to someone on an airplane, or at some sort of waiting spot, and you saw that they were reading or looking at something that you too were also interested in, a friendly conversation would probably be accepted. Oh, you're reading that new One Piece manga? I've read the whole series. I really love it. Who's your favorite character? And so, like, people wouldn't be like, can you not talk to me about this? So most people would be nice enough to be like, oh yeah, I really like it too. This series was my favorite. I like this arc of the series and stuff like that. And then you'd go your separate ways and that's it. But in Japan, if you try to do that, you're sometimes, most of the time, almost 100% of the time, going to make Japanese people very uncomfortable. Number one, they're, especially if you start it up in English, if you start the conversation up in English, they're just going to be like, sorry, I just don't speak English. Like, please don't put me on a spot where I've got to try and struggle to speak the little bit of English I learned back in high school with you, a person I've never met before. That makes them very nervous. That just puts them on the spot. They worry they're going to say something rude, which, even if they did say something rude, we would know it was a mistake. But for them, it's just like too much of a faux pas. They don't want to be in error and say something like too casual or, like I said, just too rude. They're worried about being polite because in general, Japanese people are very polite with good manners. And in general, just people don't strike up conversations in places where you're forced to wait together in groups. You wouldn't start up a conversation while waiting in line at the grocery store. You wouldn't try to start up a conversation while waiting on the train to get to your next stop. In fact, I've talked about this many times before. When you sit down and you're a gaijin, if there's people who feel uncomfortable with you being a foreigner or someone who might try to speak English to them, even if it's just to ask for directions, they're going to move right away. I did have seats clear out when I would sit down sometimes because people would be worried that I would try to just start up a conversation. And I think this was because mostly a lot of my train lines ran to the airport. So there would be like a lot of foreigners coming off of there and suddenly asking like, hey, when I get off at Osaka, how do I get to Swiss Hotel out in Namba? And they'd be like, you're using all the English names for everything. I have no idea what you're saying. Please don't put me on the spot like this. I'm just trying to get to work today. And it's kind of also because the Japanese people are just so polite in general. If you put them on a spot where you did try to ask them to find directions for you, they'd be like, okay, I've got to stop now and try to find this person directions. I can't just leave them lost on the train. Like I've literally had people walk me to spots when I asked for directions before. Luckily for me, most of the times when I was having people help me with directions, they saw I was already lost and came up to me and started to speak to me and be like, are you lost? Are you looking for a place to go? And I'd be like, yeah. And with the little bit of English they knew, they would literally walk me there. And in general, that's how polite the Japanese are. And so if they're like in a rush, if they are busy, if they're on their way to work, of course they don't want to be suddenly stalled out where they're like, now I'm forced to walk this person to a location that's way out of my way and I don't want to do that. I just want to get to work. And I think maybe this is just another aspect a lot of weeaboos just didn't understand, that there's almost kind of this, once you've been engaged in a conversation, there's little to no way to back out of it without seeming rude to the Japanese. Like in America, if I tried to ask somebody about a comic book or a manga or an anime and they just weren't into any of that stuff, they'd just be like, nah man, I don't know anything about that stuff, and they walk off and you'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. But that would be like considered super rude in Japanese. So they would try to like talk about what little bit they know. They, smile awkwardly and, okay, yeah. We have that here in Japan. That's true. Okay. And then some of these weeaboos would, once they talk to someone like this, they try to be like, well, let's hang out and talk about this stuff, or like watch the newest movie, or see go to the local manga shop and buy these. And if you try to make an appointment to hang out with a Japanese person, they will do it, but they are so busy with their work schedule and life schedule in general that they will schedule stuff like 3 months out. They'll be like, okay, hold on. take out their scheduling book, or, you know, I guess now a lot of them still use iPhones to schedule now if they're of a certain age, but there's still many of them who still pull out a schedule book. And they'll schedule something, be like, 3 months from now on Friday, I have a day off of work. I can fit you in between 12 o'clock and 6 p.m. And you'd be like, what? I don't know. I don't know if I'll be free that day. That's too far out for me. I have no idea what's going on that day. I don't even have a calendar on me to start looking up what's happening around that time. But for them, that's totally normal. Like, they will say, I'll hang out with you, but this is my only free day. And to think about, like, how nice that is. They've barely got any time off of work. And they're scheduling that little free block that they have with you, a person they've just met, or a friend they've just made. I mean, that's kind of really selfless when you think about it. But a lot of weeaboo would take this as like, oh, so you just don't want to hang out with me because you're trying to push me off for the next 3 months. And it's like, no, Japanese people are so busy and their lives are so full and their schedule is so packed that they're literally just trying to find the one little bit of free time that they have for you. They're being like crazy polite. They're being super nice and altruistic. Like, just go with it. If you really want to hang out with this person, make time in the next 3 months. And maybe that's like, that's a cultural thing you learn over time of just living there, that Japanese have their life schedule packed to the nth degree. So that's about it. I think that about covers just about every reason of why a lot of weeaboo don't survive for a long time. I think in general, if you come to Japan with a little bit of research and an open mind, you'll easily avoid all these troubles. I think if you come to Japan thinking, I need to learn as much about their language and culture as I can, while, holding on to the good things of my own and not trying to push my own culture on the Japanese or brag about it or say, why isn't it like my culture's way? I think you're coming with the right attitude then. If you're coming with expectations that you are putting on the Japanese, I think that's a bad idea. You really shouldn't put any expectations on another culture that you've never visited before, because what you read and see and hear about the culture is always far different from what the actual IRL culture is like. There's not enough articles or videos you can even see on the internet to give you the real life feeling of what it is to live in that culture. And I think that's where a lot of weeaboos go wrong. I hope that's helped today explain the reason why weeaboos don't always last long in Japanese culture, nor end up staying as long as those who come with kind of a more balanced integration into things that they like about Japanese culture, or those who come with an open mind to what they still don't know about Japanese culture. Until next time, I've been Unrested, and I hope you like and subscribe. If anybody's watching this from a new perspective, you've just found my channel, wow, hello, thank you. I've been here for 16 years now. I don't know how long I've been doing these videos. Can you subscribe? That'd be cool. Until next time, have a great rest of your day.